Hi, welcome everybody to the Langley Adams Library. I'm very excited to introduce all of you to Andrea Penrose. She's a USA Today bestselling author of a Regency-era historical fiction. And tonight we're actually going to focus on her Wrexford and Sloane Mystery series. And she's also written Regency romances, written under other names. She's published internationally in 10 languages. She's a three-time RITA Award finalist and the recipient of numerous writing awards, including 2 Daphne Du Maurier Awards for historical mystery and 2 Gold Leaf Awards. She's a graduate of Yale University with a BA in art and an MFA in graphic design. Andrea fell in love with the Regency England after reading Pride and Prejudice, like many of us, and has maintained a fascination with the era's swirling silks and radical new ideas throughout her writing career. She lives in Connecticut and blogs with a community of historical fiction authors at wordwrenches.com. And she has a website, so you can always go to her website, and she also has an Instagram account. Welcome, Andrea. We can talk about your other books too, but I just, the whole purpose was that your new one, Murder at the Merton Library, is coming out in a couple days. So we're really excited to get a sneak peek and the scoop on this book. Before we get into all that, if you could just tell a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing, and then we'll go from there. And anybody, all of you that are Zooming, please feel free to write any questions or comments in the chat, and I will get to them eventually. I have a lot of things I want to hear about first, and so go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for having me. As we talked about before the Zoom began, libraries have always been a very special part of my life. Ever since I was a little kid, I just loved going there and discovering books and having my imagination taken to faraway places and wonderful stories. So it's always a thrill for me to come and speak at a library. And to that point, I actually wrote my first book when I was 5 years old. And I have the proof because my mother saved these wonderful little pieces of paper that I had lavishly illustrated a story about cowboys and horses, spelling horses with an extra E in there, which became a family joke for a number of years. I am still a very bad speller, but yes, there are some of them. I've just always had a lifelong love for writing, but when I got to college, I was also very interested in art and into drawing and design, and I majored in art, but went into book design, actually, in publication design. So I like to sort of say I have a left brain, right brain love affair with the printed page. And I worked as a creative director for a number of years in New York, but I went back to writing on weekends, and I got very lucky and sold my first book, my first adult book. And then was sort of doing it half and half, and then just decided to totally devote myself to writing, and was lucky enough to be able to do that. So I'm really, really pursuing something that was always part of my DNA, I guess.
And I'm curious about, so you've written, I know it kind of looks like you started out in romance, and then you eventually, it's always been like a historical twist on it, but whatever you want to say, that genre, but then you finally started getting into a mystery and doing suspense a little bit. I'm on the right track there?
You are. I enjoyed writing romance, but the stories are very much, a relationship, and usually a book will end in it. You don't do a series on the person. What interested me really in writing too is I love relationships, but I like to sort of explore the complexity of those, not just how you fall in love, but how you deal with adversity. To me, mysteries are such an interesting genre because you have you have something to solve, and a lot of times it's very convoluted, and it causes you, the protagonist who's trying to solve, to maybe face your own vulnerabilities, to question, who do you trust? I mean, it calls into play a lot of how do you teamwork, how do you learn to see things maybe from a different perspective, because that's sometimes what you need to actually solve a crime, to see it through a different lens. And all of those things just interested me. So I really wanted to write a mystery and see if I could explore those things more. And the Wrexford and Sloane, I think, has been really interesting because in the first book, I chose to do two protagonists are in the series. Lord Rexford is a very wealthy aristocrat. He is an amateur man of science. I don't say scientist because that word wasn't coined until 1838. So they called themselves natural philosophers or men of science. And he's very analytical and very brilliant, but sees things through a lens of being analytical. Where Charlotte Sloane is a satirical cartoonist. In Regency times, they were the equivalent of Trevor Noah, Jimmy Kimmel. They were the social commentators, and they would do these elaborate, very cutting cartoons, but those that don't do them justice. They're these very elaborate hand-colored prints. They're usually, like 2.5 feet wide and tall. And they would talk about scandals, like what the royalty was doing, or if there was a scandal at the Bank of England. They would really say what was going on, and they would put these prints. People who had enough money could buy them, and would buy them like you'd buy a newspaper, but the print shops also put them up in the windows so that the people who couldn't read, the general public, or couldn't afford to buy them every day, could go and read them. And they could really bring down a politician. So these people were really, but to learn the secrets, you had to have your sources. And my protagonist has urchins, the street sweepers, the maids who work in the wealthy homes are her contacts, which make her a great satirical artist, but they also make her a great sleuth, because in the first book, the Earl, Lord Rexford, is suspected of a murder because he's been having a public feud with a very pious cleric who has been criticizing his opinions of things and his lifestyle. And they've been having a real war of words, and the cleric is found murdered. And so he is the prime suspect. Well, the Charlotte Sloane happens to come on the scene of the crime because she's alerted by one of her urchin, and she sees evidence that she's pretty certain he didn't do it, and so she's sort of not sure how to convey this, because she can't sort of go to the authorities, but he is also wondering how she knows. She does a cartoon of the scene, and they wonder how she knows this, and he manages to find out who she is because she works under a pen name because no woman could criticize
Oh.
the government or the people in power. And so she's very, nobody knows who she is, but he makes a deal with her, a deal she can't refuse, really, that if she will help him prove that he's innocent, she won't unmask her and ruin her livelihood. So they hate each other at first, but they learn to respect each other. They both see things, are very good observers, but they see things in different ways. So it's been fun playing with that. You know, obviously we're now into book 7. They have a much more complex relationship than they did in the beginning. They've come to be very good friends, and in fact are now married.
Oh, wow. Obviously,
But
I've got a lot of catching up to do. I
but
like to read things in order.
you
So.
this series, I actually encourage people to, because the characters really develop. There are a lot of side characters, and when I talk about urchins in the very first book, there are 2 very young brothers. They're, you know, basically about 8 and 10, or and Charlotte has taken them under her wing because she's found them sleeping, you know, on the sort of the doorstep of her, and she's taken them under her wing, and they're very clever and smart, and they help solve mysteries with her. And the relationship with the Earl, and the Earl has a very good friend. It all grows and intertwines, and that has really been a fun thing for me to develop too. How relationships and how sort of found families come together. So there are a lot of layers, as well as solving the mystery in each book.
They sound like great characters. I'm really can't, I'm sold. I hope but with that said, and yes, you already said this is the 7th one in the series. I find it very interesting, your setting, and this happens to be the Merton Library, and going on your website. I just wanted to mention that you have like a place where people can click on and you can do some further research on your own. And one of them, it talks about the Merton College Library, which is, so how did you decide to pick this library? And
It's a very famous it's the oldest academic library in the world in continuous use. Merton College was built in 30 or something. It's one of the oldest Oxford colleges, and I've visited there, and it's just this atmospheric, this amazing college you go into. And you know, it's different than our universities. They're all of you they people talk about Oxford University, and it's really, there I don't know how many colleges, but 15, 18, they add new ones, but the core ones, they're self-governing. You know, when students apply, they apply to the actual college, not Oxford in a sense. And they're all under that umbrella, but they're very autonomous. They have their own warden, is the head of the college, and it's such an atmospheric place. And it played a small role in book 6. The Prince Regent and the Tsar of Russia came, and that was a historical fact. They came during this grand celebration that was in London. They came because Oxford was giving a number of the foreign dignitaries. This is just after Europe had beaten Napoleon. He had abdicated and was sent to Elba. And so they were giving honorary degrees, and the King of Prussia was here. It was just an amazing time in London. And they actually, Merton hosted the Tsar of Russia. And so in doing my research, it was really fun to see Merton was tied into some of these events during the Regency. So it just seemed fun to pick pick their library.
Yeah.
It's just a gorgeous, really atmospheric interior of it. All the old wood and the carols where the books. It just seemed like a really neat place to put a murder.
Well, a good excuse to go now. I mean, I'm sure you started writing these before COVID and then
Yeah,
got
yeah.
through the pandemic, but what a great excuse to go do some research. And
Is. I love London. There's so many esoteric museums, you know, like the Museum of the Guards, and that those are the guys you see in the bearskin hats, but they're seven, I think 7 guards units. And you know, I went in there and they're just wonderful to actually see the uniforms, and it's really nice. But then as I'm walking out, I ask a question of what. There was a wonderful elderly gentleman at the entrance desk, and I stopped to ask a question, and an hour and a half later he's there drawing, say, you can tell what unit a guard is in by the way the buttons are arranged on his tunic. And learning things like that are just so much fun. So I get a kick out of that. And
that's great. No, you've got a very solid
yeah.
storyline going there. You know, I
I
don't know what the expression is, but you've got a great thing going there.
I love history. I could have majored in history. It's just that, again, it's always, even when I was a kid, I loved reading historical books. And so to me, going down what we call the research rabbit holes are so much fun, because half the time you're going after one specific fact and you find something else and say, that's really intriguing, I'm going to follow that. And you know, you end up going a number of different places, and sometimes make wonderful discoveries that end up going into the book too, because they're things I wouldn't have thought to research, but I find out, oh, this gunsmith actually made the pistol for the Prince Regent. And so, you know, oh, I'm going to have him do something in my mystery. So it's just,
That's great. And I'm sure there's a lot of trial, like other authors, trial and error. And because, you know, like Dangerous Liaisons, you interpret heroines, Lords of Midnight. It seems like you finally found your niche, and you actually write another popular series called The Lady Ariana. Am
yeah,
I
yeah,
saying it right?
yeah.
And you're on book 8 there. So
Uh-huh.
you go back and forth. What, you know, do you want to tell us a little bit about that series?
Yes, I actually, that I do, we call it being a hybrid author. I self-published that series because I had started it for Putnam Penguin, and they they changed their whole mystery line around, and they ended up, you know, saying, well, we're not going to continue with the series. And I enjoyed writing it so much. It's a little more political, what's going on in the political world of the Regency, where Rexford and Sloane, I always use an early technology innovation as the sort of the MacGuffin for the mystery. I'm transgressing a little bit. What I love about that is technology. I love writing about things that I think relate to our time too. And the Regency, technology was disrupting their world. It was the Industrial Revolution. You suddenly had looms, you know, steam-powered looms coming in. They were beginning to do the first batteries that were playing with electricity, and the idea that you could harness electricity. And so, you know, for just like we feel sometimes, it's disrupting life. You're changing things very quickly, and change is frightening to most of us. And so, how to work that into part of the mystery? Either, you know, I sometimes play with patents actually were very valuable in the Regency, as they are today, if you made an innovation in technology. And so, you know, there was skullduggery going on about murdering someone to get his invention. There are a lot of parallels that I find fascinating. So that's what I play with in Rexford and Sloane. and with the Lady Ariana, it's more some of the political, what the French, Napoleonic Wars, a lot of really, Europe was being remade at that time, and there are a lot of very interesting things I find going on that
Yeah.
parallel our times. So I sort of get to focus on those two things by doing two different series.
I think I'm very impressed, and I'm a history buff myself. And I think also as I have gotten older, there are things we all had to learn when we were growing up, but maybe we were I don't know what the word is, overwhelmed with it all, that I appreciate it more now. And I want to learn more. I grasp, if that's so like you, I'm kind of like, so I'm finding this very interesting, because, and you obviously you have a handle on it too, which gives you credibility in your writing, which I find that's where I get critical when people take liberties and it's like, wait, that didn't happen. That didn't happen until 5 years later or something. Sometimes they and so I'm glad you pay attention to the detail of things. So,
I do. I try and be really, and sometimes, I mean, history is even better than fiction. I mean, I had in book 6, I had a climatic scene on a lake in the middle of Hyde Park. It's called the Serpentine, and it's a very famous lake. And they were doing this grand celebration for having beaten Napoleon. So there were fireworks every night. I mean, elaborate fireworks. And they actually staged a naval battle they built over 100 special ships that were manned by like 2 sailors each. And they were reenacting the Battle of Trafalgar. I mean, honestly, and then half the boats had bombs in them. I mean, fire bombs, so that they were done by long fuses, so that at a certain point, all the French fleet was going to blow up and the fireworks were going off. I mean, I use that as a plot point, having the villain, abscond on one of the boats and they're chasing him. And I always do try and do elaborate author's notes so people don't say, oh, you made that up. How could they possibly do a naval battle, but it was true, absolutely true. So it's fun. It's really fun looking at that stuff.
So we had a question and it was just, I didn't mean, I think it ties in together very well. And so you have your Lady Ariana, you have the Wrexford and Sloane, and then in January, I've heard that I haven't gotten an ARC yet. I hope they send me one.
Sure.
You're starting another, I don't know if it's going to be a series or standalone it's not a mystery, historical fiction.
It is part of my editor came to me and asked if I'd be interested in doing there in historical fiction. There is sort of a trend that's happening where you take some unsung people in history. And again, I'm going to digress a little thing. One of the things that I love about history is it isn't etched in stone. We keep discovering. To me, these days, the tapestry of history is getting so much more colorful and weaving in people who've been marginalized in traditional narratives, women, people of color, gender, everything. Their stories a lot of times haven't been told because they didn't fit into sort of the narrow traditional narratives. But there's so many people who had great achievements and just have been sort of in the shadows of history, and they're coming much more to the fore. And so what I do, I love when I find a very strong woman or a mathematician, or the book 8 that I'm working on, I found there was a woman who was running her husband's business, and they were engineers, basically. They designed the copper sort of sheathing that would go on the naval vessels to keep the worms from eating the boats. And she had a patent on that. She began getting into bridge design and was the first woman to actually have a patent. And a very famous bridge builder actually asked her permission to use her invention on a very notable bridge. You never read that in older histories, but these are the kinds of things that are coming out, which I just find fascinating. And if I can, I try and weave them into my books when I find somebody. There's this wonderful, actually a film was just made on him, the Chevalier de Saint-Georges, who was the first, he was Mozart, he was a Black composer of classical music, and Mozart was blown away by his work. And he was also a champion fencer and considered, in his day was known throughout Europe as this amazing gentleman. And he founded one of the first all Black regiments in the French Revolution. He fought for France and in the Napoleonic Wars. He's this amazing, larger than life character. And again, very few people. He's now coming more to the fore. The New York Times did an article on him, which is how I learned. And then I went and did some more research. Fascinating.
Marie Antoinette, the PBS,
yeah,
our masterpiece. What theater?
Yeah, there are so many wonderful stories and sort of exciting.
Well, she's I think she's intrigued with him and has him come forward. That's where I first he came to my attention. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to.
He's really interesting.
So your book is The Diamond of Longden. Sorry to cut you. Lady Hester Stanhope. Can you just give us a little?
She is just this amazing woman. I knew of her later life. She became the most famous traveler in the 19th century, really. She went to the Middle East, and she left London. My book is just about her London life, and it ends when she leaves. I'll explain sort of her earlier life, but she went there. She was shipwrecked off of Rhodes, the Isle of Rhodes, lost all her baggage, so she had to dress in men's clothes, Turkish men's clothes. That was all they could give her. She thought, "Hey, this is great. This is so comfortable." She never then went back to wearing women's clothes. Had a turban. She was this larger than life, and she wanted to be important. I mean, she ended up raising her own army. She was known as the Queen of the Desert. She rode astride, not side saddle. And the warlords didn't quite know what to make of her. They sort of decided, you're not really a woman, because if you're a woman, you're English, and they somehow came to a conclusion that she is an equal, because they just were so impressed with her negotiating. The British government came to her for advice on how to negotiate with the warlords, how to keep peace in the area. But getting back to her early life, she is she came from a very, very influential family. There are three: the Stanhopes, the Grenvilles, and the Pitts. Her grandfather was William Pitt the Elder, one of the most famous prime ministers he was Prime Minister of England during right before the American Revolution. His son, William Pitt the Younger, who is Hester's uncle, her mother was his sister, is probably the most famous. He became prime minister at age 24 and ruled for quite a while, and was just amazingly powerful. her other uncle was, in the foreign secretary. Another one became prime minister after Pitt the Younger died. Her cousin is a war hero, a very famous war hero. This family, just her father was this eccentric scientist. He and Benjamin Franklin were friends. They were the most knowledgeable about electricity in the world. They
Just
wrote all sorts of
sorry, people are, and Robert explained to me that only we can see the chat, so that's why I apologize. People
Yeah.
are asking me, what's the name of this book again, and this lady? It's called The Diamond of London, and she's speaking about Lady Hester Stanhope. So
Yes.
the book's going to come out in January of
It is
2024.
up for pre-order on all, but it's a novel inspired, but I've stuck very, very closely to her real life. She wanted so much. If she had been a man, she would have been prime minister. She was smart as a whip, and but she ended up, Pitt the Younger never married, and he trusted her as his advisor. And when he resigned for a certain time because he disagreed with what the king wanted to do with Catholic emancipation. He wouldn't give Catholics the vote, and he really disagreed with that, so he resigned. He came back 2 years later, and he brought her as basically his private secretary, and every powerful man in London knew they had to go through her. She finally had a seat at the table, but she also has a number of tumultuous love affairs. She was very much in love with a diplomat the first time, but these amazing people. And then a General Sir John Moore, who actually I have a crush on on John Moore, just one of these real heroes. I haven't read one bad word about this guy. He was revered by his troops. Everyone he was an honorable soul. And historians debate whether they actually had an agreement to marry. They definitely were friends. She met him earlier in life when he was friends with her Pitt the Younger, her uncle, and he died in early death. Then suddenly she is, nobody cares about her anymore. The powerful, she has a small stipend, and she's living with she's always been protective of her younger half brothers. Her father remarried when her mother died, and she gets them positions in the army. She reconnects with Moore, and she helps him navigate through some of there are things going on in the war in Spain that he really disagrees with, but he is sent to handle the army, and he dies a hero's death there, and that is why she leaves London. She is so devastated by his death that she has to get away. And her brother, one of her other brothers, is killed in the same battle, and the youngest one is badly wounded, and so she takes him to Greece to recuperate, and then she ends up never ever coming back to England. So she's just this amazing woman, and her triumphs and her tragedies just were so interesting to me, and I wanted to sort of share her story, because her younger life isn't known as much. She gets very eccentric towards the end of her life, when everyone knows her riding, with her turban and her armies. But her early life is sort of what really formed her, I think. And it's fascinating, exciting, scandalous. And as I said, triumphs and heartache and disasters, and how resilient she was about recovering from swimming against the stream. She was never going to win. Society was never and I think she obviously knew that, but she never gave up her dream. She just this was who she was. And she's really an extraordinary woman.
So we have if anybody has any questions in the audience, yes.
How do you know in advance how many books are going to be in a series when you start a series? Or does it just kind of come to you and evolve as it goes along, like a living thing?
We don't know when we start. It depends, some of it is commercial. I mean, the publisher has to decide they want to keep going. I've been very lucky in that the series seems to have a nice readership. So I will keep going as long as I feel I have good ideas, and that I can keep doing new things with the characters. I don't want it to get stale. So it's hard there's going to be at least one more. Book 8 has already been turned in, and I'm working on book 9, and then we'll see. We'll sort of play it by ear, but I might start something new just to change gears.
Do you someone asked how you develop your characters, how you come up with them?
I take a daily plotting walk every day. I really do. I take a long, an hour walk, and that's sort of when I just freewheel. A lot of times when I'm writing, I'll be, why that scene isn't working? Why isn't it working? And when I walk at the end of the day, I mean, neurologists will tell you, your brain, when you do something physical, you change your synapses. There's so many times I'm walking where it's sort of like, oh my goodness, I see exactly what's wrong with what I've been working on. It just takes getting away from the screen and doing something where and focusing on, gee, isn't the sunlight beautiful? And then suddenly you sort of free up and change. I think the characters grow very organically. I'm what in writer world, when I talk with other writers, you're either a plotter, which means, you sit down with your file cards and you know exactly where the book is going, or you're a pantser, which means you write by the seat of your pants. I am a total pantser. I have sort of an opening scene, and I kind of know where I'm going to want to end up, but I have no idea what's happening in the middle. And that to me is the fun of it. It's not always fun, because there are times when I think, how am I ever going to get myself out of this mess, but it's just, there are days really where I will push back from my chair and say, honestly, I had no idea they were going to do that today, but they just, I don't know. I just sort of, I can just feel it when it's not, this isn't right. They're not doing the right things. They're not having the right attitude. And I just sort of keep trying to sort of push them around a little bit and see, to begin with, one of the character in book 1 that is Rexford Beck's friend, his name is Sheffield. And I totally put him in thinking he's just going to be, in Regency, you call him a fribble. He's sort of just a funny sort of, not shallow, but he's there for kind of comic relief or being the wise guy. And by book 2, I was sort of kept writing him that way, and a scene came up where something momentous had to happen, and he stepped up and actually did something really, that made everyone else in the book go, whoa. And I thought, he just sort of told me, no, I'm more important and I'm more interesting. You have to. So he has become a very integral part of the books and the plots. And he's grown in ways that I had no idea were going to happen when I started the series. And to me, that's just sort of the fun of it.
Someone else wants to know if your books are on audio tape.
They are on audio. They're in Audible. You can, I know a number of libraries have them, but also if you're a real audiobook fan and you belong to Audible, they're all available on Audible.
Just trying to check real quick. Someone said they love your WS series, have read the entire line, and I'm interested in getting the Merton book. I get my books from libraries in 4 states. Wow. All have your WS books, but don't have the Lady series. Why is that? And
Because
somebody
they're
says,
only an ebook. I'm so sorry. I haven't done, as I said, they're self-published. I have my graphic design training, so it's really easy. There are programs that can do the ebooks. I can design my own covers. I do all that. To do paper books are much more labor intensive. And I just haven't taken the time out from writing. I'm a slow writer, I feel. And so I know other people have been asking for paper, and I promise I will try and get them out in paper so they can be in libraries. I'd love for them to be there.
that answered my question, why we don't have your books. Because I was like, well,
You could get them for Libby,
well, I'm in a consortium with like 39 other libraries. And speaking of that, I've got to get in the habit of it when I start, before I introduce my special guest, to thank Robert Hayes of Tewksbury, because I am using Tewksbury's Zoom account this evening, and I have joined, we have partnered with Chelmsford and Groton libraries. And so I want to thank all 3 of those libraries for partnering. This is a new thing we're doing. I'm Monday nights, Groton's Tuesday night, Tewksbury has Wednesday night, and Chelmsford is responsible for Thursday night. These are all our evening virtual programs. Of course, in my case, my library, I let people come to the library. I work Monday nights and I Zoom with my guests on a big screen, or unless they're here in person, and I let folks come to the library in person and provide some snacks and things like that to help bribe them to come too, especially on this rainy night. And everybody, you're always welcome to come, but I'm the only one doing that. Everybody else, it's a virtual only, but it's open to everybody that's participating tonight. Just go to any of our websites and you'll see on our calendars the other programs. So I got that plug out of the way, and my thank you, forgive me. Someone has said, I read all fiction as ebooks or audiobooks. Libby is great. Thank you for that little, yes. And your librarians can help you if you don't have understand how to do Libby. They're saying, thank you for this presentation. You've talked about your writing process, so we covered that. Whoops. And then someone, yep, that was it. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. So does anybody else have any questions from the audience, live audience? Anybody else Zoom have anything they want to ask? Yes, I think I got a couple more. Are you going to continue with the WS series after the Merton book?
Yes, there is. Book 8 has already been turned in, and in fact, it has a name, but it will be revealed soon on my website.
I also want to say, if you go to Andrea's website, you can find all, like, keep up with all her books, like the book that's coming out that we just spoke about, that's coming out in like she said, you can pre-order it on her website. I
try and do some history, on it, and under the section that I call diversions, I write little essays and do a slideshow of a lot of the things that happen in the book. Like I was talking about book 6, which is Murder at the Serpentine Bridge, and that has that grand peace celebration that was in London. I have a whole little essay on that, and wonderful prints that show the fireworks, the Temple of Peace, which again they stormed with an army, and then it was all canvas tarps painted to make this look like an elaborate castle, and then the tarps all dropped down, and it revealed this peace palace, and the fireworks went off. It was just it was incredible stuff.
I appreciate that you do that because
I just have fun doing it.
well, a lot of times when I read something, it strikes my curiosity, and
Yeah.
you know, and there's a question that I facilitate two different book clubs, and there's like this question of, did you have to stop and Google something? And I do that a lot. If there's something, like, so, and I just, not to mention another author, but the one that pops in my head who I hosted a few months ago is Alyssa Maxwell, and she writes about the Rhode Island, the Newport,
Sure.
that, she's writing in that, oh my gosh, the Gilded Age, period, those mysteries. And on her website, she does that. You can go back and learn a little bit about the house she uses, the setting, or that and so thank you for doing that. I was able to learn a lot about the Merton College Library thanks to that. So
I think I hope readers do enjoy that. I know I do too, as I'm an avid reader as well as a writer. And so I love it when an author shows me or teaches me something new, and I can go and look at something on their website and actually see it. As I said, I come from a visual background, so I love that sort of stuff, and I try and even as I describe things, a lot of people call me a very visual writer because I do like to try and paint a picture. I hope
that's great. That's
see whether you're in the slums, I want you to feel that fog and stench, and if you're in a ballroom, the glitter and the opulence of that era. It's fun for me to try and convey that to a reader.
Somebody just asked something else. It is open, and I'm grateful as I'm sitting in North Carolina. So anyway, I can't help but notice that you have a copy of Lethal White on your shelf behind you. And that is, believe it or not, the mystery book club that I'm involved with. We read that book a couple of years ago. It was before COVID. And so it's not the first in that series, not knowing it was J.K. Rowling. And I've read all of them since. I'm still like, it's just interesting because I love it because it's totally different than
I love her writing in this. I mean, Robert Galbraith is one of my favorite mystery authors. I've read all of. I can't wait. There's a new one coming out. I think in 2 weeks or.
They get longer and longer and
longer. Yeah, I know. Well, it's like Harry Potter. I mean,
yes, exactly.
I don't think she can write a short book anymore. I mean, but I'm so happy. I love Strike and Robin. I think they're just again, to me, mysteries are all about the protagonist and how both of them have such interesting backstories, and how they relate is just wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I can
see you.
As I said, I'm an avid reader as well.
Awesome. It's very and not to get sidetracked, because I could say, have you seen the TV show? But as you're talking about Lord Wrexford and Charlotte Sloane, I can't help but think of Miss Scarlet and the Duke, and I didn't know,
I have seen that, yes, yeah.
Oh, someone just said I read The Vanishing Type by Ellery Adams. Who I learned through this. Thank you. In this book, there is a subplot about hidden clues in the cover, and which you may enjoy. Thank you for sharing that, Judith. You're getting a lot of thank you for this presentation. You're very welcome. I'm very lucky because I have a nice partnership with Kensington Publishing, and also Penguin Random House, and somehow before COVID I was able to go down to New York to the book expo, which they don't have anymore.
I know.
And I met a lot of different authors and publishers, and I'm very fortunate to have started a relationship with them, and just kind of started with local people just reaching out saying, can you come to line up programs. And Zoom has really opened the doors, because you're down in Connecticut on this rainy night, and we've had people from all across the country and
know.
over in England, and that's
Yeah.
why I have to do my Friday afternoons because of the time zone. I
Right.
can't do it on a Monday night. That's why. Anyway, but I'm feel very lucky, and I forget, and it's so funny. I started with is Larissa
Yep.
Pickens?
Yep.
Okay, so you
Yep.
know, and then I get like Ann Pryor. Oh, she's my nonfiction. You know, I get them all mixed up, and then all of a sudden it's Jussie. There's all different.
There
They've
are,
grown too, and so I have all these different
yeah, genres.
connect editors or whatever their titles are to help link me up. And I feel so lucky when she, you know, she sent me this arc, and I'm like, oh, this looks really good. And it helps me branch out of my, you know, all these, working in a library. I am the adult services librarian. I am in charge of developing the adult area, but it's like so many different books,
Oh, of
you know,
course.
and
So
it's
many
so funny
different
because a
genres.
book will come in, and before I'm like, don't we already have this? No, it's because I've been reading all the reviews. I had, you know, been waiting for it to come. So it's like, and it was in Book Page, and it's like, it was in this magazine and that, and I'm going, so it's really exciting to meet you and have you. I'm being sincere. It's so exciting. And not every book that they send me, I have a whole bin full of nah, because I'm getting to know too what my audience members. So I but then again, I do try to every now and then help a new author out. So, you know, I feel like that's part of my, job too. But you're doing very well. Your books do not, they go out of the light. I mean, you were already popular. I think that's the only reason why it jumped at me. I'm like, I know this name, Andrea Penrose. Why do I know this name? And I went over to the shelves. I'm like, there were no books there. I had to go look you up, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're all checked out. That's why. It's like, so yes. So I think you like hearing that too.
I do, of course I do.
So anyway, I don't have anything else, but I think we all enjoyed. Yeah, very much. We are excited. I think I'm excited to start this, to have another series to read and to recommend, and definitely can't wait till the Diamond of London. And also curious about your lady Ariana, and I hope that, like you said, that maybe
I'll try with
whatever. You're doing well. Thank you so much. And I say this, that if you ever are up this way when it's nicer weather, please, you're welcome to hop in.
That would be wonderful. You heard what I said about libraries.
I'll call everybody that's here, Charmaine and Barb and Linda. I said, come on over, she's here. Everybody will come running. Anyway,
well, thank you so much for having me. It's really been fun.
Yeah. And thank you too again. Like I said, Robert has been my right hand person with the technology side of this. I really appreciate his
thank
help.
you, Robert, very much for doing this. It looks fabulous.
Yeah, no problem, Andrea. Wonderful to have met you. Thank you for a wonderful program. And Sue, I'm ready when you're ready.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And I do have a lot of people have already caught Emily Franklin's talk, but if you haven't, I'm hosting. Well, she was supposed to come to my library this Friday and something happened, but I'm still Zooming with her. It's from 1 to 2. Usually I do 2 to 3, but it's 1 to 2 this Friday. And she is the author of The Lioness of Boston, which is about Isabella Stewart Gardner. So anyway, that is this Friday, which is a historical fiction. And Monday night, I have to do my plug. I hope a lot of you will join me next Monday night as Colleen Cambridge, who writes that series about Agatha Christie's fictional housemaid. She also has a new series that has the French murder mystery.
Julia Child.
Yes. And Colleen, who lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan, is coming to Connecticut. I'm not sure what she's doing in Connecticut, but she's coming to my library next Monday night. I'm
That is
so
great.
excited. She's going to be
the
here in
two of us
person.
are going to be at our Julia bookstore in Connecticut together.
Okay, I figured. That's why I figured there's something going on.
Colleen and I are good friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
We've done stuff together. She's terrific. You'll enjoy having her. She's
And
really...
I might be meeting you. I'm not going to say too much. Let the cat out of the bag in May. There's a special thing going on May 18th, and I'm hoping you're going to come. Ask Larissa about it. That's
I
all
will
I'm gonna
ask
say.
Larissa.
Ask Larissa.
She's been
Make
out
sure
at the conference.
Make sure
so
she invites you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
anyway, tell Colleen I'm really excited about next Monday night.
Tell her. I will
And
tell her.
everybody out there, if it's a nice night and you want to come to my library next Monday night and meet Colleen in person, that'd be awesome. But if you can't, I hope you'll tune in. Thank you so much. Night,
Thank
Robert.
you again. Good night.
Night.